Hello. Welcome to Lab Reports, where we live, love, laugh. If you guys were
It's
wondering,
Live Love Lab.
oh, I'm dead. Okay, part two. Part two. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Lab Reports, where we live, love, lab. If you're wondering why we took a break, it's because Sophia got into a huge fight. That's why she has the cut on her nose, and she has this going on. You see,
Oh my god.
she really put up a strong fight. I think she won. Did you win?
No, I didn't win. I took 2 L's.
Yes, very unfortunately. But we're here. Withhold your hate, because not only are we here, but we're here with interviews.
Yes, we are.
So it's going to be a very exciting time. Our first guest is an incredible person. Sophia actually knows him personally. Do you want to?
Yeah, so his name is Andrew Goldstein. He is 2 years older than us, so he is a first year med student at
It's Hackensack?
yeah,
Yeah.
Hackensack Meridian School of Medicine in New Jersey. I know Andrew because I met him during his gap year, and it was the summer after my sophomore year of college, and we did research together. We were working on the same project, and he really was my saving grace, to be honest. He explained a lot to me. I mean, he was just very friendly. We became quite good friends. He is the second author on my publication as well. Yeah, I mean, he's a great guy. He graduated Colgate. And yeah, so I kind of knew him during the time where he was taking the MCAT and applying to medical school and figuring out his gap year. And now he's a full-fledged med student, and I haven't spoken to him about it. So I'm extremely excited for this episode as well. I just want to hear how he's doing, how he's liking it, how it's different from university and research. And he was a physics major as well, so he wants to be an ophthalmologist.
That's awesome.
So yeah, super cool.
Yeah, so we've conducted all of our interviews over Zoom, so we're gonna have to cut to that, but we hope you guys are able to get something out of hearing from a first-year medical student and how that's been.
Yeah, for sure.
Now, before we get into that, I also wanted to say something amidst a lot of the stuff going on right now. It's a very worrying time in science. There's a lot of...
I mean, in everything.
That's very true.
I don't even think there's one sector that this time isn't worrying for, like science, the arts, I mean, medicine in general.
Right. But yeah, there's a lot of uncertainty, especially around funding and where a lot of these programs are going to see themselves. I've spoken to a lot of people who are in research or in like surrounding areas, and I actually recently found out that NYU, this past cycle, they accepted a bunch of students to the MD PhD program, and then they rescinded all of their acceptances
No way.
because the MSTP program is no longer active at NYU.
Way.
It's literally dissolved. It's inactive now.
No way.
Isn't that crazy? All of those people who like went through the application process and all that stuff just had their acceptances taken away.
I didn't even know that was possible.
Me
thought
neither.
Accepting an acceptance was legally binding. Yeah.
No, that's because the program doesn't exist anymore.
Holy shit.
So in that vein, a lot of government-funded programs are threatened, whether it's the MSTP / like MD PhD funded stuff, a lot of research, prep programs, a lot of things that are just taking initiative to bring underrepresented communities into these spaces. So we just want to remind you guys, being a STEM podcast, especially one for people who are underrepresented, women, people of color, stuff like that, that in these times, make sure you're checking in with yourself, you're taking care of yourself, and remember that the reasons and the reasons that you're in this field and the goals and the passions and aspirations you have, none of this stuff can take that away from you. And your passion, as corny as it is, matters now more than ever. Science has always been the kind of field that required people to defy the odds and take initiative and be resilient. So make sure you really reflect on the reasons that you're here and continue to fight for why you want to be in this field. There's so many people who understand your struggles because they're going through it too, and there will be communities for you to connect with. There will be people who are fighting to find ways to get you in the lab and continue these initiatives. So even though there's a lot of uncertainty, just kind of keep your momentum, keep the hope, and hopefully, like, where there's a will, there will be a way.
Yeah. Yeah, just find people that you feel comfortable with and that you trust as well.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it's just time to like expand, to be honest, you know. All of these programs are getting cut, so instead of applying to like 5 schools, like apply to 10 schools.
Yeah.
You
But yeah,
know,
there's where there's a
but
will, there's a way, and
exactly.
there are people who are working to like still make
Of
opportunities, and
course.
maybe there will create like other, if there's funding taken from the government, maybe there'll be other programs that provide funding or other opportunities. Like it's not the
Yeah,
end.
and of course not. Science is forever evolving, and
Mm-hmm.
medicine especially. It's one of the most like, um, what's the word I'm looking for? Happening is not the one, but it's, as I said,
Like
it's just,
exciting. Like
I don't know. There's just like always
yeah,
progress to be
okay.
made. You know, it's
Mm-hmm.
always progressing, and yeah, this is like a setback for sure. And, you know, a lot of research is being cut, a lot of clinical trials are being cut. I read an article where I don't remember exactly for this, that's so bad of me. I don't remember exactly for what this clinical trial was for, but it was started, and this woman had a medical device inserted into her as a part of it, and they cut the clinical trial and left, like, I mean, she had to have surgery to remove it, but then she had to pay for the surgery because it wasn't being covered
Oh my
anymore by the clinical
gosh.
trial. And now not only does she not know, does she not have like a like hope to fix whatever was wrong with her, but now she's in debt because of that. And I mean, yeah, it's definitely a scary time, and it's really important to acknowledge that and to talk about it. But yeah, just exactly what Talia said, where there's a will, there's a way. Science is forever evolving, and this isn't gonna stop anything, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so with that, we hope you guys enjoy the interview. Hopefully, it'll inspire some hope and bring you guys a new sense of optimism for
Mm-hmm.
what there is to come, especially if you're considering medicine. So, yeah, we hope you guys enjoy.
Hi guys. As we mentioned, here is our first interviewee, Andrew. As I said, Andrew and I did research. It was my first research experience and a couple years back, and he is a first year med student, so we thought it would be really great to have him on and to talk a bit about his experience with medical school. But before all of that, Andrew, like, why don't you give a little bit of a background about you? Like, where did you go to school? What was your major? Yeah, things like that.
Hi, Sophia. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. Good to see you again. So I went to Colgate University. I majored in physics because I started out thinking that I would, either go to grad school in physics or go do engineering afterward or something like that. And then around the time the pandemic hit, I decided that I might want to pursue medicine, and I finished out my physics major. I did the pre-med courses. I managed to throw together somewhat of an application, and here I am.
You're being very humble, Andrew. You had a lot going for you in your application.
Thank you.
So you said it sounds like the pandemic was a major point in like helping you decide you wanted to go into medicine. Were there any other extracurricular activities or any other experiences that really solidified, hey, this is the journey I really want to take?
Yeah, I think uh, I started thinking about it around the pandemic. I don't know if I didn't really write about how the pandemic changed my life or anything, it changed all of our lives, but that wasn't really, the main thing that I was writing about. It was mostly that as I, started shadowing doctors. I got licensed as an EMT in New York this summer after my sophomore year. I just, I realized that I did want more of the front facing, like, patient facing role as opposed to a primarily research role. And I know that I still want to do research and I want to make it a part of my career, but I wanted the main part of my career to be taking care of patients.
Can you tell us a little bit more about your application? Like, what research did you do, publications, any other extracurriculars?
Yeah, yeah. So I was a little bit, it's funny, I'd say that I wanted to go to grad school and all this stuff, but in actuality, I was pretty late to the game when it came to starting with research.
Mhm.
I really got involved with research starting in my senior year of college. I joined a physics lab that they were working on this really cool concept of being able to distinguish different types of tissues using quantum entanglement. And we won't go too far into that, but then that's how I made the connection with the lab that I worked with Sophia at the summer after my senior year. And we were doing similar stuff with lasers, distinguishing types of tissue. Then we move towards uh, some more chemical physics type work with, uh, you know, yeah. And yeah. So I ended up with, I wrote a senior thesis. I had an abstract published for a conference senior year of college. Then we did another abstract the summer after, and then we finally got a peer-reviewed publication, uh, the year after I graduated college. Um, and then other extracurriculars, I was a teaching assistant for electronics, the physics major course,
Mhm.
and I was an EMT. I was a volunteer EMT upstate near Colgate for 2 years. And then during my gap year, I worked part time as an EMT in addition to doing research. And yeah, for EMS transport in New York City.
Okay. Um, so was our publication together your first like official publication? Okay.
Yeah, it was. It was my first peer reviewed publication.
That's awesome. I mean,
Yeah,
mine
that's
too,
impressive.
obviously.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You don't need, contrary to popular belief, you really, depending on, if you want to apply for an MD PhD like Talia, you probably want to, you know, emphasize publications in your application. But if you want to, apply for, clinical medicine, it's not as necessary as maybe sometimes people say it is.
I have a little bit of an off track question, but I forgot that you were a TA. What was like, how did you feel about TA? Did you like it?
Yeah, I actually
I'm a
really
TA now too. I mean, Talia's been a TA since our sophomore year at college, but like this year, I'm a first time TA, so I'm curious with your experience with that.
Yeah, well, I liked it. I was mostly a lab TA. I graded things for one of the 2 years I was a TA, but it was in an upper level physics course, so we weren't trying to weed anybody out. Nobody was really, coming to me like super angry or anything. And I'd imagine, people with experience TAing, general chem or organic chem may have different experiences. But I really thought that it was, it it was formative and, my wanting to maybe pursue academic medicine and be involved in teaching medical students and residents in the future. I like that type of, relationship, and I enjoy, being the mentor, and I'm extremely grateful for, the people who are currently mentors to me.
Awesome.
Yeah, that's very awesome. Also, it sounds like so you were balancing a lot in your undergrad between like being an EMT, a TA, doing research. Do you think when you started med school, it was a bit of a culture shock? Was there anything like surprising, anything unexpected about balancing it all, or do you think you were able to transition into it nicely because you had already been doing so much?
Yeah, medical school ends up being what you make of it.
Hmm.
There isn't really a super pressing need to overload yourself with extracurriculars, especially as a first year student. It depends on what types of specialties you want, how you want to aim your career. But once you get into medical school, your primary job is to just pass your classes and, do well and, learn as much as you can and be able to pass your boards and be a good doctor eventually in a long time. So I think it's interesting in that extracurriculars are essentially requirements to get into school in the first place. But once you're in, you can kind of choose how much you want to engage with that. I've had a few meetings actually recently to get started on some research here, but I didn't feel like I was totally overwhelmed with things to do. I guess the one exception to that would be during anatomy. The anatomy course was a lot between lab and them introducing new clinical skills things and just having to memorize basically all of human anatomy in 8 weeks. But yeah.
Nice.
Um, yeah, like t talk a little bit more about like how it's been. I mean, I'm also very curious about how it's been like your first semester. I mean, now you're into your second semester of medical school, but like what has that really looked like for you? Like, I mean, you told me a little bit before we started this call, but again, like how are classes and what does lab look like for you? Like, are you dissecting bodies already? Like, I would assume yes, right?
Yeah, so anatomy lab, every school kind of does this a little bit differently. Some schools will have, labs sort of more distributed throughout, the preclinical curriculum. How my school does it is we had a, cadaver lab twice a week for a span of 8 weeks. It was the second block. Like we use a block system instead of it. We don't take 4 classes at a time. We could just kind of all do the same thing at once, which actually leads to it makes things easier sometimes. But so we were in lab a lot for 8 weeks, and we were yeah with in we had cadavers and the cadaver experience I see it was it was valuable, and we had a whole ceremony to appreciate the people who donated their body to science, and I felt like that was important. It once you step in there, it feels like, oh my God, like I don't know what I'm doing, and somebody has entrusted me to work with someone this a human body, it feels like. But that's also part of getting accepted, like that
Yeah.
you are the one that needs to learn how to do this, otherwise nobody's going to know how to do it.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah. Um, I guess a big question is like reflecting on everything you have experienced so far, all of that you've gone through applying and the things you're learning along the way as you're going through med school. Do you have any advice that you can provide to someone who's considering this pathway, who may be unsure or is ready to go, but they're not completely sure about like how to develop their story, or just anything you can give to someone who may be in your position a year ago?
Right. um that's a good question. I everybody has their own path to some extent, but I definitely think that you know pacing yourself is important. Making sure you really want to do this is important. It's very, very hard to throw together an application, and that's for your own benefit, because if you don't really want to do a lot of the things required for the application, it's going to be difficult going forward. It's a long road, and I can't really comment on this as well as maybe somebody who's further along can, but you do want to make sure that you have a genuine reason. Whether you exaggerate that reason a little bit on your applications, everybody likes to be a little bit dramatic in their applications, and sometimes it's necessary. But you do want to make sure that like you really do not have an alternative career that you'd prefer, because it is a lot of work and it's a long time before you see your life stabilize and you see the reward.
Okay, so I, know what you kind of wanted to go into or what field of medicine you wanted to go into, and I'm curious if that has changed or if that has stayed the same and kind of like, yeah, I mean, again, you're a first year medical student, so you still have like a long way to go, but what are your kind of afterthoughts?
Yeah, I mean, it's important to consider that even from now. We're kind of in limbo as preclinical students where we are constantly being asked to tell people our specialty choice while also simultaneously not having the resources and knowledge to fully explore each specialty. So I can't really say for sure what I want to do. I think that, yeah, coming in and still now, ophthalmology was high on my list. My dad is an optometrist, so eyes. I got exposed to eye care, vision care very early. Um, I've also think that I'd really enjoy uh, neurology, uh, cardiology as well, and something that I've discovered so far just from preclinical studying that I really enjoyed is hematology and hematology oncology. And I, that's the latest field that I'd consider exploring before I make a final decision.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Um, I also like, I don't know, just like how has medical school been in terms of like, I guess social stuff, like finding a place to live, like making friends. I don't know. I'm curious as to that. And how, and your professors too, like, how do you feel about them?
Hmm. Yeah, I think that my school has, it has a pretty good culture. We are pass fail preclinical, so there's not too much competition. That being said, we are thrown into an auditorium all together every day. It kind of feels like high school a little bit again. But you know, everybody here that I've, talked to, that I've made friends with has been really, really nice and open. And there is that element of like the shared experience that you're going through. Um, Nobody really understands it except for somebody who's currently going through it with you. um I don't want to scare anybody. It's not like you're going off to war or something. It's not that bad. But um it's I think that people want, people want positive energy. People, and as far as how to make friends, I don't know if I'm even the best person to ask, but I've made a couple friends. I made a few great friends so far, and really, uh, a good portion of them have just been by sitting in our corner of the auditorium in the small groups that they put us in. We have three small groups, which were impossible to keep track of for the first few weeks, but I met some of my friends there. And you're going to be together with so many people that I'd actually argue that the social aspect of it is more built in and an everyday thing than it is in college. In college, you kind of have to make your own schedule. Everybody has different places they're going, and you're busy, but that in medical school, you're kind of doing the same thing as most of your other classmates.
So then would you say it's been easy to kind of find a balance between like your social world and like your academic world, or if not, how have you been able to create that balance?
I see. Are you maybe more towards like a discussion of like workload? Um, yeah, yeah.
I mean,
It's
I
not
was
easy.
interested in just making friends too, so.
Yeah, yeah. Um, Workload goes up and down. Um, the biggest thing is to be consistent about it. You do not want to cram, because what's going to happen is, some people fall into doing whatever they want for the first half of the block and then having no life for the second half of the block, and that's really up and down stressful. You don't really want to do that. You want to be consistent, study every day for at least a couple hours. Some days you'll study more. Um, and so far, like, the biggest hindrance to my social life has been anatomy, as I said before. And but even during anatomy, I'd say over half of the weekends I was able to go see my friends at least once on the weekend. And but a lot of the time you also just want time to decompress yourself. Um, that's important too. Uh, but yeah, the workload goes up and down. I'd say there will be months where you won't do much, and there will be months where it feels like college again. And actually, I shouldn't say that because some of college is very hard too. But there will be months that it feels like,
Yeah, college is hard.
yeah. Yeah. I'd actually say that some of my semesters in college were harder than a lot of the than uh some of the blocks that I've had so far. But uh medical school is much more emphasis on just study every day, make sure the spaced repetition. There's people have probably heard of Anki. Basically everybody's using Anki.
Are you using
Um,
Anki?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
It took me a while to get to adapt to it because I was always, as a physics major, I was not very memorization heavy. Uh, but it's been, it everything's all set up for you because medical education is very standardized, that people have, made
Yeah, that's
so
what
many cards that are all relevant, and it's very useful.
I've used Anki, or I've tried to use Anki for biochem specifically this year, but I always found that I was spending like way too much like making the decks instead of like actually what's it called, like using them to study. But then I feel like medical school, it's like a lot more like everyone is learning like the same thing, that it's easier to use like already pre-made decks. Whereas like in college, it's like the professor's testing you, and it's like the professor's material. But yeah, that's
I
interesting.
think you're 100% right about that. I think in college, a lot of difficulty comes from what the professor decides to teach. Whereas in medical school, it's kind of just like everybody teaches a little bit of everything, and basically everything you could think of, especially as somebody with, no experience, is gonna be on step one. So if it and there's so many cards available, I use the On King deck. It's probably pretty famous among medical students. And there's also outside resources like Boards and Beyond or Boot Camp, stuff like that, that have shortened versions of lectures basically with high yield material for board exams. And those videos are correlated into, they're tagged in On King, so you can unsuspend new cards after you watch a specific video,
That's
and
cool.
they're all made for you already. You don't I actually still do sometimes make my own decks just because it helps me learn, but I don't make decks for like an entire course worth of material because that would be obviously way too much time.
Wow.
I mean, I guess the time is kind of dictating where this interview has to go, but any parting tips of advice, any parting funny stories, anything else you want to share? Do you want to plug any kind of um, podcast, social media, maybe shout out your med school, anything you want to do in these last minutes?
Yeah, so I go to the Hackensack Meridian School of Medicine in New Jersey. I've been happy here so far. Every student experience comes with some frustration, but I think that they're doing a good job. And yeah, so apply. Maybe I'll see you in next year's incoming class. But uh other than that, just the biggest thing that I'd say to, a younger student would just be to pace yourself, because I feel like sort of I didn't pace myself well. I was very sprint then stop, just trying to fulfill things, and then up and down. And what works in medical school and what works better in a medical school application is if you set your goal from the beginning and you don't overwhelm yourself and you work toward it at, you just do something towards your application every day if you can.
Awesome. That's great advice. I mean, thanks so much, Andrew. We really appreciate this, and you really gave us like a lot. I mean, you gave both of us a lot of stuff to think about, and I'm sure like our viewers will really appreciate this. So thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you for having me on. Maybe I'll come back in a couple of years and I'll have more experience to share.
Yeah, maybe we could do like a 1 year check, like an every, or like a check-in when you're done with medical school and then when you're done with interning, and et cetera, et cetera.
I'd love to.
All right, we hope you guys got a lot out of that. That was a fantastic interview with Andrew, who gave a lot of insight into not only what it's like in med school, but also what it's like applying and kind of getting into the mindset of, is this the right path for me? So stay tuned. We have so many more interviews coming up. Also, leave suggestions if you have any kinds of interviews you might be interested in. But with that, we hope to catch you guys next week. And we'll see you then. Have a good week.
Bye.